Hey, I can't today. Listen, I got a buddy of mine who's about to do the worst lease option deal of his life. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he shared with me some of the terms of the contract. He is about to freaking get hosed. I hate it when this happens.
One shot, now the future is yours. Go! I'm turning dreams into reality. Yeah, it's one shot, now the future is yours. Go!
Oh man, here we go again. Tell you what, this stuff is real. Lease option literally can be one of the best things. It can seriously be one of the worst things. But you know what? What you don't know can hurt you in a really, really, really bad way. And you know what? Over the years, I've met a lot of people that have been hurt by something that I've also seen be a huge blessing to a lot of people. In fact, I've been hosed on a lease option before. And so I've had to eat crow before, and I'm gonna tell you today, I want you to understand what a lease option is, what makes it such an amazing, brilliant strategy, what to watch out for that can allow it to become super predatory so that you can protect yourself. So on the one hand, it's like, how do I leverage this information to create wealth? And also, how do I protect myself? It's gonna be interesting. After I bought my very first investment property, it was a home that I lived in. I rented out the basement, and it was like great. Like after renting out the basement, it covered the mortgage. I was basically living for free. I knew that I was a crazy fan of real estate. However, that was just the first deal, and even though I got a great deal on it, how was I going to own lots of other real estate that I wasn't gonna live in? I'm like, well, I need some kind of strategy. And this is when I picked up one of my first mentors. He was doing this thing called a lease option. He said, hey Kris, this is where you buy a house, you get a really good deal on it, but instead of renting it, there's something else that you can do that ends up being twice as profitable. And I'm like, dude, what's that? Sounds like that would be a really good thing to investigate. Well, Kris, it's called a rent to own or a lease option or a lease with an option to purchase. I'm like, rent to own, like what does that mean? It's like, well, you're the investor, you bought the house, right? Instead of just renting it, you're now kind of like the bank and you're telling a family, hey, don't rent this from me. Instead, I want you to buy this home eventually from me. And sure enough, if you as the investor will actually work with the person and within a year or two help them actually buy it, there's a way to do it right where it's like the best thing for them and it's the best thing for you. It's the best thing for them because they're like, well, we didn't want to rent and throw our money away anyway. We've been trying to get into home ownership and you made that possible for us. But it's also really good for the investor because if you bought it right with a lot of equity, you've got a hot cash flow on it. When you sell it, you can take that money and you can roll it in from one home to two homes, and then you can accelerate building a portfolio. So I'm like, dude, lease options sounds like really, really cool. Where does this go bad? So check this out. A lease option is a contract in which a landlord and tenant agree that at the end of a certain period of time that the renter can buy the property. The tenant pays usually some kind of upfront consideration fee, and then they pay an additional amount every month. It's like added cash flow to the person that owns the home. And some of this will actually go towards the eventual down payment or lowering the purchase price of the house. And so it's a form of seller financing. Seller financing means I bought the house as the investor, and the person I'm gonna rent it to is also the person that's going to buy it. And in many lease options, what they end up doing is giving you a down payment of $3,000, $5,000, sometimes even $10,000 up front that can go towards lowering the purchase price. So it shows you that they're serious. They commit, by the way, to take care of the property. This is part of what makes it really fantastic. I don't need to pay a property management company. They're gonna improve the house. They're gonna treat it like it's their own. I love all these things. But then on the cash flow, you usually get several $100s a month higher cash flow. So Kris, are you telling me that rather than renting a property, I can basically seller finance it under a rent to own or a lease with an option to purchase to the family that might eventually buy it? And you're telling me that instead of like a rental deposit, they're gonna give me a non-refundable down payment, if you will? You're telling me that instead of renting it at $1,600 a month, they'll pay like $1,900 a month? Like you get more cash flow, you get non-refundable deposit, and then more importantly, they're also gonna take care of the house? Kris, lease option sounds like this could be done right, a really cool win-win for both the investor, and the family that wants to buy the house. And you know what? Done right, you're right.
That is correct.
And I have to tell you that lease options have literally just become one of the most popular forms of real estate. Look at the problem we have. We have 5 million missing homes. But people still own homes and we still have people renting homes. Do you think at a time when real estate prices are going up, that renters really want to just rent? Dude, think about it this way. Let's just say that over the course of the year, that this is how much money I'm gonna be paying to rent. It's gone forever. Forever. Meanwhile, people that own the home, what are they experiencing? Appreciation. Their asset is increasing in value. Hence, you have more renters that are like, yo, I wonder if we should be like, I don't know, buying a home, owning a home. And so check this out. This comes straight from Investopedia on why renters want to own. Since 1965, more US households are currently renters than at any point. However, 72% of renters said that they want to own their own home someday. The problem is that the median household wealth among homeowners currently is 3,965% higher than it is among renters, and home prices continue to climb. In other words, when people talk about like the rich are getting richer, well, technically, if you own a home, you just got richer. Like the value of your home probably increased $150,000, $200,000. Meanwhile, renters didn't cash in on any of that. So there's a huge gap between the have and the have-nots between renters and homeowners. I actually had to like quadruple check the math on this because I'm like, what? A 4,000% increase in wealth between owners and renters? I'm like, that would not have been true before the pandemic. But since we've had the pandemic and since inflation is on the rise, that number is only going to skyrocket. So today I've got two different reasons for sharing this video with you. One of them is if you're a renter and you're like, hey, I think I want to do this thing called a lease option, I'm throwing up a big caution warning saying, guess what? There are some sellers out there that might scam you or take advantage of you. And the last thing you want to do is get preyed upon. I'll teach you how to make sure that doesn't happen. On the other hand, you might be watching this saying, yo, Kris, I'm a subscriber on your channel. Teach me how to be wealthy, bro. Because I can teach you how to do real estate with little to no money down. And seller financing with lease options is one of those strategies. So on the one hand, today's about protecting yourself if you're trying to do a lease option. The other one is how you build wealth if you want to do lease options. We just got to work through this tiny little ethical problem that exists out there, is that some sellers are scammers. There are untrustworthy people in the rent-to-own industry, just as there are in any other industry. Some sellers try to take advantage of rent-to-own through illegitimate or problematic rent-to-own deals. Educating yourself on the most common rent-to-own scams is the best way to reduce your risk of becoming a victim of one. And let me just tell you right now, I literally had this woman call me up years ago. She says, Kris, I'm losing my house to foreclosure. And I'm like, that's it. Like, what do you need to get caught up from the bank? She says, Kris, I need $12,000. And I said, well, if I write you a $12,000 check so that you don't lose the house, will you then sell the house to me on seller financing like a lease option? She says, done. So you know what? I wrote her a $12,000 check. I did all the paperwork. And then I took the house and I remarketed. I leased it out to somebody else who gave me a down payment that went to make a move on buying it. And that family couldn't quite buy it. And right when I was in the middle of releasing it out again, this woman comes back to me that once owned the house and she says, I want my house back. And I'm like, you can't have your house back. Remember when I paid $12,000 to keep you out of foreclosure? Like in exchange, I got the house with its equity. It didn't have a ton of equity, like $60,000. She said, I want my house back. It's gone up in value. And I said, I know, it's my house and it's gone up in value for me. Remember, we like sold this to me. Well, turns out I hadn't done at that point all of my paperwork right. And she basically said, I'm going to take this from you and I'm going to take you to court. And listen, I had built so much wealth that I just said, fine, take the house back. I literally lost out on the $12,000 I had given her, and I could have sold the house and made a pile of money on it. I decided to let it go, but it was due to negligence because at that point I wasn't yet an expert like I have been for so many other people. All right, so before I share with you some of the ways that you could get scammed or maybe even taken advantage of, let me just help you understand the basics. All right, so let's just say for a moment that I own a house. Let's say that the value of that house is $250,000. And let's also say that I have a mortgage on this house that with everything all in and et cetera, whatever, you know, for ease of numbers, we're going to say that it is $1,000 a month. So normally option number one would be, well, Kris, let's just rent this sucker out. So I'm like, well, it doesn't matter really what it's worth. And I'm going to rent it for $1,200 a month. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to gain $200 a month in positive cash flow. But when someone says, well, I'm actually interested in doing a lease option or a rent to own, why is that attractive to, I think we know why it's attractive to someone who wants help getting that home, but why is it attractive to the investor? Well, first of all, they might agree that says, hey, that house can't be sold for less than $290,000. What I just did right there is that doesn't say what we're going to sell it for, but it locks in $40,000 that I need to make on it as it appreciates and goes up in value to protect my investment. But on top of that, we also say, well, it's going to be $1,500 a month to rent. So I'm like, wait a second. Now I'm actually positive $500 a month in positive cash flow. Then under renting, if you have property management fees will charge you 10% of that $1,200. That's going to cost you $120 every month. Well, you don't have that on a lease option. And instead, with rent, you often have the value going down when it comes to the maintenance and the wear and tear on the property. But here, the condition of the home with a lease option often stays the same or it even improves because people are treating it like their own home. Basically, when I go to sell these homes, under both of these, metaverse scenarios 5 years later, whatever I'm going to make on this home, let's just say that it ends up being $50,000, I will usually make at least double $100,000 plus with this scenario. So lease option is something that is actually really, really attractive. It's worth learning about. I wrote a book about it. It's my Straight Path book. I give it away to a lot of people for free when I have copies available. In the link below, I probably have some available. Click that link, learn all about it. This is how I bought, by the way, my first 25 homes that produced a $12,000 a month cash flow. And that was enough for me to quit my job and then become a full-time investor, double my portfolio, triple it, and then things got crazy and out of hand. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the pitfalls and trial and errors or ways that you might be taken advantage of or worse, scammed. So here's some of the things that could go wrong. The first one is called a preemptive application. You haven't actually seen the house yet. You're interested in doing this lease option, this rent to own, and they're already kind of putting you through a process to see if you're financially qualified because frankly, they're looking for people with money. Number two, the home is far overpriced or underpriced. So you may, as a consumer, not be educated on what something is worth. You could sign a contract saying that you'll buy this house for $1 million. I mean, not really that number, but something significantly more than it should be. What if someone is representing a house where the landlord is actually not the owner? Like they're not the technical owner on file and they're trying to sell you something they don't own. The home is already being foreclosed. Yikes. The contract is confusing. It's got weird things in it. It doesn't quite make sense. Or the landlord prohibits independent inspection where you might find something and have a concern. And they're like, oh, no. Like the house is as is, right? Some of these things can become hyper concerning in structuring the deal together. And I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes people that are looking for a lease option or a rent to own are people that have either financial struggles or maybe they're between jobs or maybe their credit isn't where they want to be. So the idea of trying to go to a bank and getting qualified is kind of scary. So instead, they respond to a handmade sign that says rent to own, no bank, qualification necessary. And they're like, oh, I can still get into a house without the criteria. Some of the people looking for that financially are not the most savvy people. They could literally walk into this and make some huge mistakes contractually without really even knowing it. Now listen, there are some ways to definitely get yourself protected, and here are them. You got to research the home. And if you don't really know what you're researching, then, get with someone that understands the game of real estate so you get a second set of eyes on this. Number two, research the seller. Like, is there anything that you can see about them? Do they have a online profile, social media? Double check the fine print. In a contract, I hate to say it, not a lot of people like hearing it, you should understand everything that you're signing. Sometimes we're just like, that's legalese. I don't really need to know that. I promise you, you do, and you'll learn a tough lesson in life at some point if you don't learn that. Get help, which I already talked about. Check the title. Like literally, a title company can produce a quick report and just say who actually owns that home. And then finally, avoid paying any, what I'm gonna call upfront unnecessary fees. Because someone might say that you have to put down $20,000 or $50,000 and say you have 6 or 12 months to buy the house, and if you don't, then you're gonna forfeit all that down payment. And that's one of the biggest cons that I've seen is they'll collect a really massive down payment from someone that they know in a year won't qualify. And so instead of a nice long contract, they make it really short. They boot you out of the home and they try to collect someone else that has a huge down payment. It's like collecting a whole year's worth of rent up front, knowing that a year later, if they can't qualify, you're gonna kick them out and you're gonna keep the dough. So Obviously, that's like ambulance chasing, it's predatory, it's not cool. So be aware of that. I remember the very first time I completed a lease option with a family that actually bought the house. Man, they could not stop ranting and raving about how meaningful it was for them, for us to have stepped in, bought the house, made it available to them. When they went to actually go and buy it and make it truly their own, and that's when we got cashed out, it was a tremendous feeling. I knew that I had done something that had really helped them. And I have to tell you, the real win-wins in life are things where everyone benefits. And so I got hooked from that point on. Here's some things that I like about lease options. A rent-to-own agreement can be an excellent option if you're an aspiring homeowner, but not financially ready. These agreements give you the chance to get your finances in order, improve your credit score, and save money for a down payment while locking in the house that you want to own. This is a great strategy, especially in today's economy and market, but you definitely need to make sure you're doing it the right way. I wrote a book about it, and what it will do is it'll literally teach you how the tenant wins, and it'll also teach you how the investor wins. In fact, I've got this program that this book is all about called Compassionate Financing. And it says, do this strategy. It's a lot wealthier for you to do, but go out of your way to help people. And in this book, I'll give you the strategies of how you help them qualify and go through the process and buy the home. Because when they do, it's a great feeling. It's a win for everyone. And this book is not only how I made my first $1.6 million in 4.5 years that freed me from needing a job, but it can do that literally for you. It's done that for so many other people. Click the link below. Just cover the shipping and handling on the book. The book is yours for free. And in it, I'll teach you the 5 steps and everything that you need to know about building wealth with this amazing singular system. Well, Kris, would you say that lease options is the best strategy for me to learn? Listen, in another video, I talk about the good and the bad and the ugly of many different forms of real estate. In fact, I take some of the most popular and I do a little bit of compare and contrast to help answer that very question. Because if you're going to get started on the path, make sure you start by doing the right things to have the level of success that you want. That video that I just talked about, it's right here. Click this video and let me show you the good, the bad, and the ugly so that you can win with the right strategy. I want you to be running up to me as well. You ready? Hey, I can't today. Listen.